There is too much silence in my house in Moundsville. It envelops every corner, every room, soaks into the old furniture and bookshelves. I, Irwin Taylor, 73 years old, have lived here for 46 years, but only in the last 5 has the silence become so palpable. When Edith was alive, the silence in the house seemed something elusive, fleeting, like an evening breeze, blown in and gone. This morning I had breakfast alone again. Oatmeal and coffee was nothing special, but Edith always managed to make even this simple dish special. My wife would add cinnamon and a little honey to the oatmeal and a drop of vanilla extract to the coffee. Little things that made an ordinary breakfast a warm memory of home. I look out the window at the small garden behind the house. October in Moundsville is a riot of colors. Red maples, golden ash trees, brown oaks. It's as if nature had decided to throw one last fireworks show before the gray winter sets in. Edith loved our garden in the fall. She would go out with her camera and spend hours catching every hue, every glint of sun on the fallen leaves. I still have 7 albums of her fall photos. My musings are interrupted by a phone call. The sound is too loud, too harsh, too foreign in this cozy silence. Hello, I answer, even though I already know who's calling. Every Thursday at 11 o'clock. It's like a schedule. Hi, Dad. How are you? My son Noel's voice sounds a little distant, as if he's calling out of obligation rather than desire. Still alive, I answer with a dry chuckle, which is more than I can say for the east side of the garden. That big maple tree you loved so much as a child doesn't look like it's going to survive this winter. There's a pause. Noel never knows what to say when I mention the past. It's as if he's uncomfortable with the memories. It's sad, he finally says. Look, Dad, I don't have a lot of time today. I just wanted to see if you needed help with anything. I could say that I need help with loneliness, that sometimes at night I talk to Edith's portrait because the sound of my own voice reminds me that I'm still here, that sometimes I forget to eat because cooking for one seems like a pointless endeavor. But instead I say, no thank you, I've got everything. Good, I can hear the relief in his voice. I'll see you next Thursday then? Until next Thursday, I say and hang up. My relationship with Noel had always been complicated. After Edith died, it got even more complicated. He came to the funeral, of course. He stood beside me at the grave, even hugged me after the ceremony. But in his eyes I saw impatience, a desire to go back to his world, away from this small town, away from me and my grief. Noel is 42 now. He lives in Baltimore, working as a financial analyst for some big company. Never married, though I knew of several serious relationships. None of them lasted longer than 2 years. It didn't work out, was the explanation I got each time. I put my phone away and returned to my lonely breakfast. Chilled oatmeal, cold coffee, the silence. At 2 in the afternoon, I leave the house to pick up the mail. It's a daily ritual, a little adventure. Sometimes there are bills lying there. Sometimes catalogs I've never ordered. But today I find something unusual, a postcard with a picture of Baltimore. I turn it over, in the handwriting of my son, whom I haven't seen in months. Dear Mom and Dad, Priya and I are very happy to announce that we were married last Saturday among close friends. We apologize for not inviting you. The wedding was very modest. We'll come and visit soon. Loving you, Noel and Priya. I reread the card 3 times. Mom died 5 years ago. And Priya, who's Priya? Noel never once mentioned her in our weekly calls. And when did my son have close friends, close enough to attend his wedding instead of his own father? That night, I can't sleep for a long time. I lie in bed staring at the ceiling while the clock counts down the minutes. Next to me on the bedside table is a picture of Edith. I turn to her. Our boy got married, Edith, and he didn't even bother to warn us. I think her smile in the picture has gotten a little sadder. A week passes before I hear from my son again. This time he calls not on Thursday but Saturday, and not at 11 in the morning, but closer to evening. Dad, Priya and I are coming to visit you next weekend. Did you get our card? I did, I answered dryly. Congratulations on your marriage. I hope Mom was happy for you too. There's a pause. I can almost see Noel wrinkling his nose at the other end of the line. Sorry about that, he finally says. Shabinana, Priya ordered those cards, the standard text. She didn't know. That your mother's been dead for 5 years? I can't help the bitterness in my voice. Or that you even have parents? Judging by the fact that you didn't see fit to invite me to the wedding? Dad, please. He sounded tired. I told you it was a very small ceremony. Literally just us, the judge and a couple witnesses. And your close friends. Those were Priya's co-workers. Look, let's not argue. We'll come back next Saturday. You meet Priya, and everything will be fine, okay? I have a lot of things to say. That he has no right to expect everything will be fine after being so dismissive. That I am disappointed in him, not only as a father, but as a man. That Edith would be deeply hurt to learn that her only son had married in secret, and then reported it on a card addressed to his dead mother too. Instead, I say, all right, Saturday, Noel and his new wife arrive in a brand new silver Lexus. I watch them from the living room window. My son gets out first, looks around the house with some strange expression, a mixture of nostalgia and discomfort. Then he opens the passenger seat door, and I see Priya for the first time. She's beautiful, I can't take that away. Tall, slender, with olive skin and long dark hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She's wearing a simple but clearly expensive dress and shoes that look like they cost more than all my clothes combined. They walk toward the door, holding hands. I see Priya whisper something in Noel's ear, and he nods nervously. I move away from the window and go to open the door. Hi, Dad. Noel hugs me awkwardly. He smells like expensive cologne, not the kind I gave him last Christmas. Hello, son, I reply, patting him on the back. Priya stands behind him, a perfect smile on her face. And you must be Priya. I extend my hand to her. Mr. Taylor. She shakes my hand. Her palm is cool and dry. It's so nice to finally meet you. Noel has told me so much about you. First lie. If Noel had told her so much about me, she would know that I prefer to be called Erwin, rather than Mr. Taylor, and she would know that Edith was dead. Come in. I let them into the house. Tea, coffee? God, Dad, nothing's changed around here. Noel looks around with a half smile. Why change what works? I reply, leading them into the living room. Priya looks around with poorly concealed disdain. Her gaze lingers on the worn couch, the old frame photos, the bookshelves filled with tattered tomes. What a cozy house, she says in a tone that makes it clear that cozy is a euphemism for outdated and unkept. Thank you, I smile at her. This is exactly what Edith and I thought it was. Cozy. At the mention of Edith's name, Priya twitches slightly. Noel throws a concerned look at her. Dad, Priya and I would like to talk to you about something, he begins, sitting down on the couch and pulling Priya next to him. Sure. I sit down across from them in my favorite chair. What is it about? You see, Priya owns a small but successful organic cosmetics company. Noel begins with pride in his voice. And I'm expanding, Mr. Taylor, Priya interrupts him, leaning forward. We're opening a new product line next quarter, and I need a trusted financial advisor. Noel tells me that you've been quite successful in managing your investments. I look at her, then at my son. This is Noel's first visit in 3 months, his first meeting with his new wife, and they want to talk about money? I just followed a few simple rules, I say slowly. It's not a big deal. Don't be modest, Priya smiles even wider. Noel tells me that you've turned a modest inheritance into quite an impressive capital. That's impressive, I notice Noel avoiding my gaze. I've never discussed the details of my finances with him. How does he know the size of my capital? Priya, I address her directly, ignoring my son. How long have you known my son? She looks surprised by the question. We met 8 months ago at a business conference, she replies. Why? And in 8 months you decided you knew him well enough to marry him? Dad, Noel says warningly. When you love someone, time doesn't matter. Priya puts her hand on Noel's knee. We realized we were made for each other. I look at their hands. The ring on her finger looks expensive. Platinum, large diamond. Noel has never been wasteful. Of course, I smile, but I don't feel that smile. Love will overcome everything. The next 2 hours pass in awkward conversation. Priya talks about her business, her future plans, how she and Noel want to buy a bigger house. Noel is mostly silent, with only the occasional comment or nod to his wife. I watch him and don't recognize my own son. Where is that stubborn, somewhat defiant young man who always had his own opinions? Now he's like a shadow next to the bright Priya. When they leave, I stand at the door and watch their car disappear down the street. An uneasiness grows inside me. Something is wrong with this marriage, with this woman. And worse, something is wrong with my son. I close the door and walk back into the living room. There are 3 cups of unfinished tea on the table. I pick up Priya's cup. Her lipstick is on the rim, a perfectly even crescent moon. For some reason, that mark seems ominous to me, like an omen. Edith, I say, looking at the picture of my wife, I think we're in trouble. Something has changed since Priya and Noel's first visit. Instead of the occasional Thursday phone call, they began to visit regularly, every weekend, as if on a schedule. Sometimes they came together, sometimes Noel showed up alone, explaining that Priya had urgent business at the company. Today, they're here again. I hear their Lexus pull up, the car doors slamming. Through the kitchen window, I see them walking toward the house. Noel with a bag from the supermarket, Priya with a huge bouquet of flowers, the 3rd one this month. The previous 2 are already in vases, one in the kitchen, the other in the living room. "Daddy, we brought you groceries," Noel shouts with feigned joy, entering the house without knocking, as if it were his property. I come out of the kitchen, wiping my hands with a kitchen towel. Why? I have a refrigerator full. But there's probably no fresh fruits and vegetables in there. Priya walks past me, heading straight for the kitchen. "And at your age, Erwin, it's important to watch your diet." There's a cautionary note in her voice that annoys me every time. Like I haven't lived 7 decades, raised a son, or buried a wife. Like I don't know what I need to eat. "At my age, Priya, it's important to eat what you like," I parry, following her into the kitchen. She's already putting food on the shelves, unceremoniously rearranging my stuff. These canned goods, Erwin." She wrinkles her nose as she holds up a can of tomato soup that Edith used to make. "Have they been here since the Stone Age? They're poisonous." I take the can from her. "These are the cans my wife made a month before she died. And if I get poisoned by them, at least I'll die happy." Priya rolls her eyes but backs away. Noel shuffles awkwardly from foot to foot in the doorway. "Dad, we just want to help," he says quietly. "Help with what?" I ask. "I'm doing fine on my own." "But you're—" He hesitates, searching for the right words. "You're not getting any younger." "None of us are getting any younger, son." I chuckle. "Even your beautiful young wife will wake up one day with wrinkles." Priya snorts but doesn't say anything. We move to the living room. Noel sits down next to me on the couch. Priya settles in the chair across from me. I notice her gaze sliding around the room again, stopping at the secretary by the window, where I keep my papers. "You know, Dad, I was thinking—" Noel starts, but Priya interrupts him. "Erwin, Noel and I are worried about you. Living alone, unsupervised? What if you get sick? Who's going to help you? I have a neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She's only 65. I wink. "A real young lady. She visits me every day." That's a lie. Mrs. Patterson moved in with her daughter in Oregon 3 months ago. But Noel and Priya don't know that. "Still, it's not the same as family," Priya insists. "Noel and I were thinking that maybe you should consider a nursing home. There are wonderful facilities." "Nursing homes?" I raise an eyebrow. "Masad, Priya, honey, I'm still capable of walking to the bathroom and making my own lunch. I'm a long way from a nursing home. But if something happens—" "If anything happens," I interrupt her, "my will's at the notary. All the paperwork's in order. Don't worry. Noel won't be disinherited." There's silence in the room. I notice them looking at each other. "Dad, it's not about the money," Noel says finally. "We're worried about you." "Of course," I nod, "and I really appreciate it. But I'm perfectly fine." The next day, as soon as they leave, I call my old friend Holden Pierce. We've known each other since college. Holden works at Moundsville Bank as an investment consultant. He's the guy who helped me invest after my parents died. "Holden, I need your help," I say without preamble. "What's wrong, old fox?" His voice sounds worried. "My son got married," I answer, "and I don't trust his new wife." Holden listens without interrupting as I tell him about Priya, about their surprise visits, about the talk of the nursing home and the inheritance. "Did they ask anything about your finances?" He clarifies when I'm done. "Not yet, no. But I can see Priya looking at my secretary of papers, waiting for them to get to it. Be careful, Erwin. If your suspicions are correct, they could be quite resourceful. I know they are. That's why I'm calling you. We're working on a plan. I'll gradually show signs of declining health. Nothing dramatic, just a little forgetfulness, mild shortness of breath, complaints of back pain. We'll see how my caring relatives react. Holden also promises to check to see if there have been any inquiries about my credit history or other financial records. Stay in touch, he says before hanging up, and don't do anything stupid like sign any papers. Who do you think I am? I chuckle. A stubborn old man who thinks he's smarter than everyone else, Holden says with a chuckle. Next Saturday, I start my little play. When Noel and Priya arrive, I open the door, staggering slightly. Dad, are you okay? Noel immediately scoops me up under her arm. I'm just dizzy, I wave her off. It's been happening lately. They exchange quick glances. Priya takes me under her other arm, and they walk me to the couch. How long has this been going on? Priya asks, her voice carrying what should sound like concern, but I hear something else. Interest, anticipation. A couple weeks, I sigh. But it's nothing serious. It's just age. You need to see a doctor, Noel insists. I can take you in on Monday. You don't have to, I dismiss it again. I have an appointment for Tuesday. I can drive myself. Are you sure? Priya sits down next to me, puts her hand on my knee. Maybe you should see a better specialist. There's a great clinic in Baltimore. Dr. Murdoch treated my father. I smile at her. He knows all about the Taylor's health. But medicine has advanced so much, she insists. At your age? At my age, I interrupt. I value stability and trust more than the latest technology. She backs away, but I can see the conversation isn't over. All day I continue my game, forgetting that I've told them a story before, complaining about my backache, spilling tea on the tablecloth with slightly trembling hands. As we sit down to eat, Noel suddenly says, Dad, I wanted to talk to you about your papers. Paperwork? I pretend I don't understand. Financial documents, wills, insurance. He tries to sound casual. Irena Randa, Priya and I were thinking maybe we should organize everything. Just in case. Why? I frown. Everything's already in order. But you said yourself that you have memory lapses, Priya says. What if you forget where things are? I look at the two of them, so concerned, so worried, and so fake. You're right, I finally say. It's really getting harder for me to keep track of all this. Noel, why don't you help me sort through the papers in the secretary after lunch? I notice Priya and Noel exchanging glances again. Sure, Dad. Noel tries to hide the eagerness in her voice, but I hear it clearly. After lunch, Priya suddenly remembers the urgent call and goes out into the garden with the phone. I am left alone with my son by the secretary. Look, here are my insurance policies. I hand him a folder of documents. And here are my bank statements. He takes a quick look at them, and I notice his eyes widen at the numbers. Yes, my investments have really grown over the years, more than he probably realized. Where's your will? He asks, as if in passing. At the notary, Lawrence Klein. I only have a copy. I point to another folder. But it's out of date. I made some changes last year. That's a lie. I haven't changed the will since Edith died. But I'm curious about his reaction. What changes? He tries to sound disinterested, but I can see his shoulders tense. Just updating the list of beneficiaries. I answer vaguely. At my age, you have to think about things like that. Noel nods, but I can tell it bothers him. When they leave, I call Holden. They took the bait, I say. You were right. I checked, Holden replies. Someone ran a credit check on you 2 weeks ago, and it wasn't a bank or a credit card company. A private inquiry. My heart sinks, so I was right. Thanks, Holden. I'll keep you posted. For the next 2 weeks, I continue my game. With each visit, I look weaker, more forgetful, more vulnerable. And with each visit, Noel and Priya become more insistent in their care. We found a lovely nursing home in Richmond, Priya says one day, with medical staff, individual apartments, even a swimming pool. Sounds expensive, I remark. Oh, don't worry about that, she waves her hand. We'll organize everything. You will? I raise an eyebrow. With your own money? No, of course not, Noel intervenes. Chiori, we could sell this house, use your savings. And what if it's not enough? I deliberately provoke them. There's always a loan, Priya says, and I notice Noel tense up. A loan in my name? I clarify. At my age? Well, she hesitates. We'll find a solution. I nod, pretending not to notice their nervousness. That evening when they leave, I don't go straight back into the house. Instead, I walk to the garage where I have a small stash, an old safe hidden under the floorboards. In it, I keep my most important documents and some cash for a rainy day. Going through the papers, I find the original copy of my power of attorney. It authorizes Noel to make financial and medical decisions for me in the event of my incapacity. I had drawn up this document years ago when I trusted my son implicitly. Now it seems like a dangerous weapon in the hands of my changed son and his greedy wife. I call Holden the next morning. I need to change the power of attorney, I say without preamble, as soon as possible. What's wrong? And he asks. They're up to something, Holden, something big, and I want to be ready. 3 days later, I get a call from Holden. Irwin, you were right, his voice sounds grim. Someone was trying to access your property information and tried to find out about your line of credit. So they're getting ready, I say. Thank you, Holden. What are you going to do? Wait, I say. Wait and see. And then we'll see who outplayed who. I hang up the phone and look at Edith's picture. You always said our boy inherited my mind, I whisper. Let's see if that's really true. The call from Holden came in the early morning while I was still drinking my first coffee. He doesn't usually call before 9, so I knew right away that something serious had happened. Irwin, his voice sounded tense, without the usual friendly teasing. Are you sitting down? Since when did good news start with that question? I tried to joke, but I felt my insides tighten. Yesterday a loan was issued in your name. A big one. I slowly put the cup on the table. I was expecting something like that, but it was still unpleasant to hear. How big? $750,000. I whistled. Even knowing that my suspicions were justified, I hadn't expected such an amount. How was that possible? I didn't sign anything. According to the documents, you did, Holden sighed. Not only the loan agreement, but also the power of attorney for your son, authorizing him to manage your finances and property. Forged, I said confidently. I didn't sign a new power of attorney. I think so too, but it won't be easy to prove it. It's notarized. A Lindsay Frost in Baltimore. Never heard of her, I said. What did the money go for? To buy real estate in Ocean City, a condo in the Azure Beach development, a luxury condo overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. I felt the blood drain from my face. $750,000. A condo by the sea. My own son and his wife. Holden, I want the address of that apartment, and I want to know when the keys will be handed over. Irwin? Holden's voice became concerned. What are you up to? Cherie. I just want to look at my new acquisition, I said in as casual a tone as possible. I own a fancy apartment by the sea now, don't I? Technically, yes, Holden agreed cautiously, but that's fine. The address, Holden, and the date of the key transfer. He sighed but didn't argue. 15 minutes later, I received a text message from him with the address of the apartment and the information that the keys would be handed over to the new owners. That is, to me, represented by my son at 16 o'clock today. I didn't have much time. I quickly packed a small bag, a change of clothes, toiletries, medication. Then I called a cab service and ordered a car to the bus station. On the way, I pondered Noel's betrayal. How could my own son do such a thing? Was Priya's influence really that strong? Or had he always been like this, and I just didn't want to see it? It was almost 5 hours by bus from Moundsville to Ocean City. Outside the window, the scenery of West Virginia alternated with views of Maryland, and I kept trying to figure out at what point I'd lost my son. Maybe when I was too busy with my career, or when, after Edith's death, I shut myself away from my grief. Shutting it out. I got to Ocean City around 2 in the afternoon. I took a cab to the Azure Coast, an impressive glass and concrete high-rise on the oceanfront. The building glistened in the sun, reflecting the blue sky through hundreds of windows. I was met in the lobby by the concierge, a young man in an impeccable uniform. What can I do for you, sir? Sir, I'm Irwin Taylor, I said, straightening up and trying to look as confident as possible. I bought an apartment here today. Number 624. The concierge checked something on the computer. Indeed, Mr. Taylor, your apartment is number 624, but according to my information, the keys will be handed over to you, or rather to your representative, only at 16 o'clock. There's been a slight change of plans, I smiled the kindest smile I could muster. I've decided to come in person. My son and his wife will join me later. The concierge looked uncertain. I'm afraid I can't let you into the apartment without keys and official authorization from the management company. I sighed, reached into my wallet and pulled out my driver's license. Listen, young man. My name is Erwin Taylor. Here's my ID. Apartment number 624 is in my name. It's in my name, not my son's. If you need it, call the bank, the real estate agent, the president, anybody. But I'm tired from the road, and I'd like to rest in my own apartment. He glanced once more at the computer screen, checked my data against the information in the system, then looked up. Shakatur. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Taylor. That's right, the apartment is in your name. I'll call the agent to come with the keys early. Thank you. I was relieved to see his sincere desire to help. I'll wait in the lobby. It took about an hour, but eventually the real estate agent arrived. An energetic middle-aged woman with bright red hair and an unnaturally white-toothed smile. Mr. Taylor, it's nice to meet you in person. She shook my hand vigorously. I usually deal with your son. He said you were unwell and couldn't do the shopping on your own. Oh, my son exaggerated, I smiled. I have good days and bad days. Today is a good one. She led me to the elevator, chatting nonstop about the benefits of the complex, the amenities, the ocean views. I nodded and pretended to listen, but my mind was on something else. The apartment was exactly as I expected. Spacious, modern, with panoramic windows and breathtaking views of the Atlantic Ocean. The living room turned into an open kitchen, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a balcony all around. Everything was new, expensive, gaudily luxurious, Priya style. The agent showed me how the appliances worked, where the switches were, how to use the air conditioner and intercom, then left a set of keys and left, once again congratulating me on my purchase. I looked around more carefully. There was already furniture in the apartment, minimalistic, but obviously expensive. There were dishes in the kitchen and champagne in the refrigerator. They had everything set up for a romantic weekend for 2. On me. The clock read almost 4. They were due to arrive soon, expecting to get the keys from the agent. I decided to prepare for them by sitting in a chair by the window, overlooking the building's driveway and waiting. At 5 to 4, a familiar silver Lexus showed up. They parked, got out of the car. Even from the 6th floor, I could see Noel hugging Priya. The way they looked at the building together, the way Priya excitedly pointed at something. They were bursting with happiness, from anticipation. I watched as they entered the building, as the concierge said something to them, saw the change in their faces, the anxious look on their faces. Then they hurried toward the elevator. I stood at the front door of the apartment and waited for the bell to ring. I took a deep breath, exhaled, and opened the door. Oh, you weren't expecting me, I said with a smile, enjoying the shock on their faces. They literally froze with their mouths open. Noel turned so pale that I wondered for a moment if he was going to have a stroke. Priya was the first to come to her senses. Erwin, what a surprise. We were just about to... Give me the apartment? I interrupted her, still smiling. How nice of you. Come in. Don't just stand there. After all, it's my apartment. On paper, at least. They walked in like zombies. Noel still didn't say a word, just stared at me in horror and disbelief. Dad, he finally squeezed out, you weren't supposed to be here? To know about your little plan? I closed the door and walked to the back of the apartment, gesturing for them to follow me. Have a seat. We have a lot to talk about. They sat down on the couch, shoulder to shoulder, like delinquent children in front of a strict teacher. I took the chair opposite. So, I began, hands folded in my lap. Tell me everything from the beginning. How did you manage to get a loan in my name? How did you forge my signature? And most importantly, what did you plan to do next? They were silent. Priya was staring at the floor. Noel was looking away from me, avoiding my gaze. No takers? I raised an eyebrow. Okay, then I'll tell you what I think happened, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I paused, looking at them. None of them moved. My theory is this. You have decided that I am about to die, perhaps because of my health complaints in recent weeks. You knew I'd leave everything to Noel, but you didn't want to wait. So you forged a power of attorney, took out a loan in my name, and bought this nice little apartment. Is everything right so far? Noel looked up, tears in his eyes. Dad, it's not. Then, I continued, ignoring his attempt at justification, you planned to enjoy your new property while you waited for me to pass away, after which you, Noel, as my sole heir, would receive my entire estate, pay off the loan, and all is sewn up. No one would know about your little crime. It was her idea. Soon, Noel suddenly blurted out, pointing at Priya. Noel! She shrieked indignantly, moving away from him. She made the whole thing up. His voice trembled. She said you were going to die soon anyway, that it would only be a prepayment of the inheritance. You're lying. Priya jumped to her feet, her face contorted with rage. This was your idea. You said your father was rich but too cheap to help us, that he promised you money for years but never gave it to you. I watched this scene with a strange calmness. There was something almost amusing in how quickly they passed from accomplices to accusers. I never promised you money, Noel, I said quietly when they were finally silent, breathing heavily and looking at each other hatefully. Not once in my life. Because you never thought about me. He turned to me, pain in his eyes. It was always about you and Mom. And after she died, you shut yourself off from me. And that justifies stealing? I shook my head. Because it's stealing, Noel. You stole $750,000. We would have gotten it all back, Priya intervened. As soon as I was dead, I finished for her. Yeah, I get it. Only problem is, I'm not going to die anytime soon. Saru, what are you going to do? Noel asked, fear in his voice. Are you going to go to the police? I stood up and walked to the window. The ocean stretched to the horizon, vast, indifferent to our little human dramas. You know, I never thought I'd live to see the day when my own son would steal from me, I said without turning around. I never thought you could stoop so low. Dad, don't call me that, I turned to him sharply. You've lost that right. Priya stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. Okay, let's talk like adults. What do you want? The money? We can get it all back. Sell the apartment. At a loss, I pointed out. You paid above market value. It doesn't matter, she said. We'll make up the difference. Or, maybe you want a piece of my business? I laughed. It was so typical of Priya, even in a situation like this, to try to bargain, to look for a bargain. What do I want? I repeated her question. I want to turn back time, to go back to the day when my son was still an honest man, not a thief. But that's impossible, isn't it? Noel lowered his head, his shoulders slumped. So we'll have to settle for less ambitious wishes, I continued. For example, I want you both out of my apartment immediately. Your apartment? Priya raised an eyebrow. But the papers are in my name, I reminded her. So the apartment is mine, and the loan. I smiled. The loan is also mine, or rather, yours. You took it, you'll pay it off. That's impossible, as Priya exclaimed. We can't. Then sell your precious Lexus, mortgage the house, take out another loan, only this time in your name, not mine. That would bankrupt us, Noel whispered. Maybe, I nodded, but it would be fair, don't you think? And if we say no, Priya asked defiantly, if we just don't pay, then I'll go to the police, I said calmly. With evidence of forgery, fraud, and identity theft, you'll both end up in jail. Is that better than going broke? They looked at me with hatred and fear. I could see their brains working, calculating options, looking for loopholes. But there were no loopholes. We don't have a choice, Noel finally said, speaking more to Priya than to me. There are always choices, I countered. It's just that sometimes all the choices are equally bad. That's the price you have to pay for your decisions. I walked to the door and opened it. Now go away. I need to rest after the long drive. And yes, you don't have to worry about your things. I'll clear out the closets of the clothes you've already brought here. I'll mail them to you. Priya was the first to head for the exit, head held high with a look of offended dignity. Noel followed her, but stopped at the threshold. Dad, he said quietly, I don't know what came over me. This isn't the time, Noel, I interrupted him. "Uh, Maybe someday we'll talk about it, but not today." He nodded and walked out. I closed the door behind them, then turned the key in the lock and slipped the chain on. Only then did I let myself sink to the floor, leaning my back against the door and covering my face with my hands. Outside the windows, the ocean rumbled. My new apartment, bought with the money I'd stolen from myself, was quiet and empty. I had won, but it left a bitter taste in my mouth. The first night in the new apartment was restless. I sat on the balcony for a long time, listening to the sound of the waves and thinking about what had happened. My son's betrayal had hurt deeply, much more deeply than I wanted to admit. How could Noel, the boy Edith and I had raised with so much love, turn into a man capable of stealing from his own father? The morning brought determination. The plan was clear. I wouldn't just take the apartment, I would turn it into an instrument of my revenge. Let every loan payment remind them of their betrayal. Let them know that I live in the luxury they planned for themselves at their expense. But that alone wasn't enough. Priya, that calculating woman, deserved more punishment. And Noel, well, Noel had to realize that betrayal has a price. First thing I did was call Holden. "So you decided to stay at the apartment?" he asked after I'd told him about last night's confrontation. "Yes," I answered. "Why not? The view of the ocean, the fresh air. The doctors always said I needed a maritime climate." "What about your house in Moundsville?" "I'll keep it for now. I can't get rid of all the memories of Edith," I said. "Besides, it'll be a reminder to Noel of what he's lost." Holden chuckled. "Cruel, old friend, but fair. What do you plan to do with the loan?" "Make them pay, of course. If they miss a single payment, I'll go to the police." "Have they agreed?" "They have no choice," I grinned. "Besides, I've prepared a little surprise." After I'd talked to Holden, I opened the laptop I'd brought with me and started writing an email. The first recipient was Noel's Aunt Veronica, Edith's sister. They had always been close, and Veronica had a special affection for her only nephew. "Dear Veronica," I wrote, "I hope this letter finds you in good health. I have important news that I feel the need to share. I recently discovered that Noel and his new wife Priya had taken out a large loan in my name and bought an apartment in Ocean City. Without my knowledge, of course, forged documents, signatures. I discovered the fraud, but I decided not to go to the police. He is my son, after all. Instead, I took the apartment for myself and made them pay off the loan. I know you've always loved Noel, so it pains me to tell you this, but I think you should know who you're dealing with." After sending the letter to Veronica, I continued on. The next recipients were my old friends, many of whom had known Noel since childhood, a few distant relatives, and our family lawyer. I was methodical, describing the situation clearly and without undue emotion, simply stating the facts. I drafted a special letter for Priya's business partners. I found information about them on her company's website. She had several investors and suppliers of raw materials for her organic cosmetics. "Dear gentlemen," I wrote, "I consider it my duty to warn you about the methods of doing business, which are not abhorred by Priya Taylor. Recently, she and my son made a loan in my name without my knowledge, forging my signature on the documents. This is a criminal offense for which I could prosecute them. For now, I have decided not to go to the police, but I believe you should know who you are dealing with in business." By evening, I had sent about 20 letters. The phone started ringing almost immediately. The first was Veronica, stunned and indignant. "Erwin, is it true?" Her voice trembled. "Did Noel really do it?" "Unfortunately, yes," I sighed. "I didn't want to believe it myself, but the evidence is irrefutable." "It can't be," she sobbed. "He's always been such a good boy." "Veronica," I softened my voice, "people change, and not always for the better, especially under the influence certain personalities." "Do you think she put him up to it? That Priya?" "I don't want to accuse anyone," I said, even though that's what I wanted to do. "I'm just stating the facts." After Veronica, my old colleague Herbert called, then the family lawyer Richardson, then a few other people. All were shocked, all expressed outrage and support. I thanked them, saying I could handle it, that I just needed to share. The next day around noon, my phone rang again. Noel's name popped up on the screen. I waited a few beeps before answering. "Yes, what have you done?" His voice was full of rage and despair. Why did you tell everyone? Everyone? I pretended to be surprised. I just shared the news with my close friends and family. Is there anything wrong with that? You ruined my life, he almost shouted. Aunt Veronica called me sobbing. My co-workers look at me like a criminal. And Priya, he stammered. Priya's main investor refused to cooperate. Do you realize what you've done? I didn't start this, Noel. My voice turned icy. You chose this path when you decided to steal from me. I didn't mean to. Tears welled up in his voice. It was her. She convinced me. Said it would be best for everybody that you would leave me the inheritance anyway, that we were just taking it up front. And you believed her? I love her, Dad, he sobbed. She's persuasive. Sonner, love is no excuse for betrayal. I tried to keep my voice firm, though something inside was clenching from his tears. You're a grown man, Noel. You made your choice. Please, he shifted to a whisper. Please stop. Stop writing those letters. You've punished us enough already. I'm just getting started, I said, surprised at the coldness of my tone. You have a choice, though. You can pay me back all the money. Right now, the whole loan amount, and I'll stop. There was a pause. You know we don't have that kind of money, he finally said. Then pay on schedule and suffer the consequences of your actions. It's called responsibility, Noel. You should have learned that lesson when you were a kid. I hung up without waiting for his answer. My hands were shaking. Despite my resolve, hearing the desperation in my son's voice was excruciating. But I couldn't back down, not now. An hour later, Priya called. Unlike Noel, she wasn't desperate. She was furious. You crazy old man, she blurted out without greeting. Do you realize what you're doing? You're destroying my business. Good afternoon, Priya, I replied calmly. I'm glad to hear that my letters have reached their destination. Anawan, you had no right, she was almost shouting. This is slander. I'll sue you. Slander, I chuckled. I merely stated the facts. You really made a loan in my name without my knowledge. You did forge my signature. It's not slander, Priya. It's the truth. And if you want to sue, be my guest. I'd be happy to tell my story to a jury. She was silent, and I could practically hear the gears in her head turning, calculating her options. What do you want? She finally asked, and her voice became businesslike. Money? I can find something. I already told Noel. Either you pay back the full amount of the loan now, or you pay on schedule and live with the consequences. You're a monster, she exhaled. Do you really want to destroy your own son? No, Priya. I want him to understand what it means to betray his loved ones. It's a lesson he needs to learn. It's not Noel's fault, she suddenly exclaimed. It was my idea. I planned the whole thing. He just agreed. How noble of you to take the blame. I couldn't hide my sarcasm. But Noel swore an hour ago that you made him do it, that he didn't want to. So which one of you should I believe? Pause again. We'll pay off the damn loan, she finally said. But that's the end of it. You'll never see me or Noel again. He'll cut all ties with you. That's his choice. I tried to sound indifferent, though the thought of breaking up with my son made my heart ache. But keep in mind, one missed payment and I'm going to the police. She hung up without a goodbye. I set the phone down on the table and looked out the window. The ocean was calm today, with only a slight ripple disturbing its smooth surface. There was something soothing in this serenity, contrasting with the storm of emotions inside me. I called Holden again that evening, telling him about my conversations with Noel and Priya. Aren't you overreacting, Erwin? He asked with concern. What they did was disgusting, of course, but it's still your son. That's why I didn't go to the police, I reminded him. But they have to realize that you can't just cheat and use people, even if those people are your parents. What if they really cut all ties with you? I was silent for a moment, pondering his question. If Noel is so easily disowned by his father for money and influenced by a woman he's known for less than a year, maybe I never really had a real son. Holden sighed. You've always been stubborn, Irvine, but be careful. Revenge sometimes hits the one being avenged harder than the one being avenged. I promised to think about what he said, but deep down I knew I wouldn't stop. Not now, not when the process had already been set in motion. The next day I decided to act even more decisively. I found online natural cosmetics forums discussing Priya's products and posted a few reviews under different names, hinting at the owner's questionable ethics. Not a direct accusation, just vague hints that raised questions and suspicions. I then created an anonymous blog where I detailed the loan story without naming names but leaving enough details that those who knew Priya could guess who we were talking about. By late afternoon, I received another call, this time from an unfamiliar number. It turned out to be one of Priya's investors, Glenn Porter. He introduced himself and got straight to the point. "Mr. Taylor, I received your letter. Before I make any decisions about my involvement with your sister-in-law's company, I'd like to hear the whole story from you personally." I was surprised by his directness, but agreed to meet with him. We agreed to see each other the next day at a coffee shop near my new apartment. Glenn Porter was a thin man of about 55, with shrewd eyes and a neatly trimmed graying beard. He shook my hand firmly, but without being overly forceful. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet," he said as we sat down at the table. "Your letter was disturbing." "I was just stating the fact," I replied. "I believe people have a right to know who they're doing business with." "That's why I'm here," he nodded. "I'm heavily invested in Priya's company. If what you say is true, I have proof." I pulled out the folder of documents I had brought with me. "Here's a copy of the loan agreement with a forged signature. And here's an expert's report that confirms the forgery." Porter scrutinized the documents, his face growing darker and darker. "Why didn't you go to the police?" he asked, handing me back the folder. "He's my son," I answered simply. "Despite everything he's done, I don't want to see him in jail. But that doesn't mean his actions should go unpunished." Porter tapped his fingers on the table thoughtfully. "I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Taylor, and your restraint. A lot of people in your position would act differently. I just want justice. Justice is a rare thing in this world," he said. "But I agree with you that some things should not go unpunished. I will reconsider my cooperation with Mrs. Taylor's company." After my meeting with Porter, I felt a strange satisfaction. The wheel of retribution was turning, and each turn brought new consequences for Noel and Priya. That evening, Noel appeared at my door, no warning, no bell. When I opened it, he stood there, disheveled, eyes reddened, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Dad," he struggled to get the word out, "we have to talk." I stepped aside silently, letting him into the apartment. He walked inside, looking around with a mixture of bitterness and envy. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" I couldn't resist commenting. "Your wife has good taste." "Sabriwanam. Priya left," he said suddenly, turning to me. "This morning. Packed her things and left. Said she couldn't live with the man who had ruined her business." I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt satisfied Priya got what she deserved, but the other part was grieving for the son who, despite everything, I still loved. "I'm sorry," I finally said. "No, you're not," he suddenly exclaimed. "This is what you wanted. You wanted to ruin my life, and you succeeded." "I wanted justice, Noel," I said quietly, "not the destruction of your life." "What difference does it make?" He collapsed on the couch, covering his face with his hands. "It's over. I've lost my wife, my reputation, maybe my job. And all for what? Money? Not the money." I walked over and sat down next to him. "It's the trust you broke. Because of the lies you chose over honesty." Noel looked up at me with a look of pain and anger. "Do you know what she made me do? She manipulated me, played on my weaknesses." "I didn't want that, Dad. I didn't want to deceive you." "And yet you did it." I shook my head. "No one forced you to forge my signature, to take out a loan in my name, to lie to me all this time." "I made a mistake," he whispered. "I was so wrong." I looked at my son, broken, lost, destroyed by my revenge, and for the first time I felt doubt. Had I done the right thing? Had I gone too far? But it was too late. The wheel of vengeance I had set in motion kept turning, and there was no stopping it. It's amazing how quickly one can change one's life at 73. Just 2 months ago, I was waking up in my old house in Moundsville, looking at Edith's picture on my bedside table and making breakfast for one. Today, I wake up to the sound of waves in my apartment overlooking the ocean, and fresh croissants waiting for me in the kitchen that I bought yesterday at the bakery on the corner. I began to organize the apartment to my liking. I removed most of the furniture Priya had chosen. It was too cold, too impersonal, like something out of an expensive store catalog. Instead, I ordered a few comfortable armchairs, bookshelves, and moved my favorite books, and a few of Edith's photos in here. Now it is truly my home, cozy, warm, filled with memories, yet open to new ones. My life at Azure has been more fulfilling than I expected. There are many people like me here, seniors looking for tranquility by the sea as their days wind down. We meet in the common lobby in the evenings, play chess, discuss books, and sometimes go out for dinner to nearby restaurants. I have become especially close to Helen Ramirez, a widow in her 70s who lives 2 floors up. She is a former literature teacher, as I am a former professor. We turned out to have a lot in common, and our conversations about Shakespeare and Hemingway became an almost daily ritual. Today, Helen and I are walking along the waterfront. The day is clear, and the fresh sea breeze ruffles her gray hair in an elegant bun. "You look peaceful, Irwin," she said, looking at me with a sidelong glance. "That's good. When you first moved in, there was such pain in your eyes." "It was time to lick my wounds," I reply, looking out at the horizon, where the blue of the ocean blends with the blue of the sky. "And yet sometimes I notice a shadow in your gaze." She takes my hand in hers. "Especially when you look at young families with children." I sigh. Helen is too perceptive. I've told her the story of Noel and Priya, not all the details, but enough for her to get the gist. "Shorikinarim. I'm seeing a lawyer today," I say, changing the subject. "I'm going to rewrite the will." "What have you decided?" she asks. "I'm going to disinherit Noel completely." Helen stops and turns to me. "Are you sure this is what you want?" "It's final, Irwin." "I know," I nod. "But he made his choice. I made mine." "What about forgiveness?" she asks softly. "Forgiveness doesn't mean there are no consequences," I answer. "I can forgive him someday. But trusting him with my inheritance? No." She doesn't argue, just nods and takes my hand again. We continue walking along the waterfront, each immersed in our own thoughts. After lunch, I meet with Lawrence Klein, my longtime attorney, who has traveled from Moundsville especially for this meeting. We sit in my apartment discussing the details of the new will. "Are you sure, Irwin?" he asks, looking at me over his glasses. "To disinherit your only son is a big step." "I've made up my mind, Lawrence," and I reply. "In Noel's place, the beneficiaries will be 3 organizations: the Alzheimer's Research Foundation, in memory of Edith, a literary fund to support young writers, and a local animal shelter in Ocean City. Noel will get nothing." "He can contest the will," Lawrence warns. "Let him try," I shrug. "He has no grounds. I'm in my right mind, and I'm making an informed decision. Besides, after his loan shenanigans, we have proof of his attempt to take possession of my property by fraud." Lawrence nods and begins to draw up the paperwork. I look out the window at the ocean and think about the fact that there is no turning back. I cut off the last link to my son, to my family, to the past. The next day, I get a letter from Noel, not an email, but a real paper letter mailed. It's extraordinary. In the age of instant messaging, few people take the time to write letters by hand. I open the envelope and pull out several sheets of paper, written in familiar handwriting. Noel always wrote neatly, with a slight slant to the right. Edith had taught him calligraphy when he was only 8. "Dear Papa," he wrote, "I don't know whether you will read this letter or throw it away at once, but I must try. I must explain." He tells how he met Priya, how he was fascinated by her energy, her ambition, her beauty, how she gradually began to change him, convincing him that he was worthy of more, that his father undervalued him, didn't support him enough. How the idea for the loan came first as a joke and then turned into a plan. "I knew it was wrong," he writes. "Every cell in my body protested, but I wanted so badly to impress Priya, to show that I was not a coward, that I was capable of decisive action." And that's what it came down to. He goes on to reveal that Priya did leave him, but before doing so, she emptied their joint account, that he lost his job. The company didn't want her name associated with fraud, that he was now staying with a friend and looking for any job he could get to keep paying off the loan. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he finishes. "I know I don't deserve it. Just wanted you to know that I realize what a terrible mistake I've made, and I'm doing everything I can to undo the consequences as best I can. Always your son, Noel. I reread the letter several times, trying to understand my feelings. The anger hasn't gone anywhere, but there's something else mixed in with it. Maybe pity? Or is it just fatigue from the long war? I put the letter aside. The time for decisions has not yet come. Weeks add up to months. My life in Ocean City is taking on a steady, pleasant rhythm. In the mornings, I walk along the ocean, watching seagulls, collecting seashells. In the afternoons, I read or write. I have begun work on my memoir, The Story of My Life with Edith. Evenings are often spent in the company of new friends. Helen, of course, but also George Petrowski, a retired sea captain with an inexhaustible supply of stories, and Elizabeth Chong, a former chemist who in her old age has taken up baking and regularly treats us to amazing desserts. We are sitting in Elizabeth's apartment enjoying her new creation, a lemon meringue tart, when my phone rings. It's an unfamiliar number, but it has a Baltimore area code. I apologize, I say, getting up from the table. I'll answer it. I walk out onto the balcony and take the call. Hello? Mr. Taylor? It's a woman's voice, unfamiliar. My name is Samira Khan. I'm a social worker from Baltimore General Hospital. My heart skips a beat. What's wrong? Your son, Noel Taylor, was admitted last night. An overdose of sleeping pills. He's in stable condition, but, was it a suicide attempt? I'm interrupting. Pause. We can't say for sure, but the note we found next to him indicates it. The note? My voice trails off. What's in it? I'm afraid I can't discuss the details, but he listed you as his next of kin. Would you come? I look out at the ocean, so calm today, so indifferent to human drama. Yes, I say after a long pause. I'll come. Tomorrow. I spend the night before I go to Baltimore without sleep. Helen offered to come with me, but I declined. This is something I have to handle on my own. In the morning, I board the bus. 5 hours into the journey, I stare out the window, but I can't see the scenery floating by. In front of me is the image of Noel, a little boy with a mop of blonde hair and a stubborn chin so much like mine. A boy who once looked at me with adoration, for whom I was a hero. Samira Khan, a young woman with kind eyes and a tired face, meets me at the hospital. He regained consciousness last night, she says as she leads me down the corridor. Physically, he'll be fine, but emotionally, he needs help. I understand, I nod. Can I see the note? She hesitates, but then pulls a folded piece of paper out of the folder. I'm sorry, Dad. I messed up. You were right about everything. I hope someday you can remember me with less bitterness. Noel. I fold the note and hand it back to Samira, trying to deal with the lump in my throat. His room is here, she says, stopping at the door. He knows you're coming. I nod and grab the doorknob, but I don't open it right away. You don't have to forgive him, Samira says quietly. But sometimes forgiveness heals not only the one who is forgiven, but also the one who forgives. I look at her in surprise. She smiles. I'm sorry. Professional habit of giving unsolicited advice. Thank you, I say and open the door. Noel is lying in the hospital bed, pale, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. He looks 10 years older. When I walk in, he turns his head and his eyes widen. Dad? His voice is hoarse, barely audible. You've really come. Of course I did, I say, stepping closer. You're my son. His eyes fill with tears. After everything I've done. That doesn't mean I'm no longer your father. I sit down in the chair next to the bunk. We talk for a long time. He tells me how his life fell apart after Priya left, how he tried to piece it back together, but each attempt ended in a new failure, how he kept paying off the loan no matter what, how the loneliness and guilt eventually became unbearable. I talk about my new life in Ocean City, my new friends, how I'm learning to live in the present instead of the past. Did you rewrite your will? He suddenly asks. I look at him in surprise. Yes. How do you know? Lawrence Klein called me. He smiles weakly. Wanted to make sure I wouldn't challenge him. And you won't? I ask. Of course not. He shakes his head. It's your money. Your life. I've already taken too much from you. We're silent for a while. Then I say, when you get discharged, you're going to need a place to live. I have a friend who... I was thinking, I interrupt him, That there's a second bedroom in my apartment. It's empty. He looks at me in disbelief. Are you suggesting I live with you after everything? I'm offering to try. I shrug. I can't promise it'll be easy. We both have wounds that haven't healed yet, but maybe we could help each other heal. He looks at me for a long moment, then nods slowly. I'd like to try, he says quietly, if you're really willing to give me another chance. Not a chance, I correct him. An opportunity. An opportunity to be better than we were. Both of us. 2 weeks later, Noel moves into my apartment in Ocean City. The first few days are awkward. We're both too cautious, too polite, afraid to step on each other's sore corns. But gradually we find a new rhythm of coexistence. Noel has found a job at the local library. Modest, but enough to contribute to the loan payments without feeling completely dependent on me. In the evenings, we sometimes play chess, like we did when he was a kid, or watch old movies that Edith loved. I introduce him to my new friends. Helen accepts him immediately, perhaps because she herself knows what it is to disappoint loved ones and seek forgiveness. George and Elizabeth are more reserved, but not hostile. One evening, 3 months after he moved in, we sit on the balcony watching the sunset. The ocean is colored in shades of gold and purple, the sky a deep blue that gradually fades to darkness. I got a letter from Priya, Noel says suddenly. She's in California, trying to start a new business. Did she ask for money? I ask, keeping my gaze on the horizon. No, he shakes his head. Just to let me know where she is and that she's okay, and apologized in my own way. Do you still love her? He's silent for a long moment before answering. I don't think so. What I felt for her wasn't really love. It was more like fascination, a desire to be what she wanted me to be. And who are you, really? I ask, turning to him. He looks at me with a slight smile. I'm still trying to figure that out. But I do know that I am your son, and I hope to be worthy of it again someday. I place my hand on his shoulder. You're on your way to that. We watch the sunset again. I think about the strange turns life takes, about how betrayal led to a breakup and then to a new, maybe deeper understanding, about how family is not just about blood ties, but about the choices we make every day, the choice to forgive, to support, to love, no matter what. The ocean darkens. The first stars appear in the sky. We have a long journey ahead of us, full of hardship and uncertainty. But right now in this moment, I feel peace and hope. Look, I say, pointing to the horizon where the last rays of the sun are coloring the ocean's edge gold. A new day is about to begin. Noel nods, realizing I'm not just talking about tomorrow. Yes, he agrees, and I'm ready for it.